it's essentially what the finance industry has done is it's enslaved people with debt, because if they get them on the merry-go-round of debt, if they get them in a cycle of paying debt, then they can offer them other facilities and products at a slightly lower interest rate that will ease the burden and the pain. But it's just another way to keep you enslaved in debt.
Welcome back to the List Building Lifestyle. I'm your host, Igor Kafetz, and today I'm hosting Richard Cooper, the author of the book, The Unplugged Alpha, which I got the pleasure to listen to the other week. And this book left a really interesting impression on me because it shoots straight to the core, and it really calls out the man in me, and I guess anyone who reads it. It is a book for men. It is a book for men who want to be leaders, who want to lead a lifestyle true to their core. And I found this book to be extremely refreshing. And that's why I wanted to get Richard on the show. So Richard, welcome to the List Building Lifestyle.
Thanks for having me, Igor.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. And I was also pleasantly surprised when I was researching you that you're actually nearby, right? You're a fellow Canadian, live in Ontario. So another feather in your cap, I guess, to move you to the top of the list for potential guests. So before writing the book, you were dispensing testosterone advice, so to speak, to men on YouTube. How did that came to be? Like, because your background is completely different.
Yeah, my interests are what I express in the content that I create, and a lot of times you have to make your wounds your work, is one of the things I talked about in the intro of my book as well. So one of the issues that men struggle with today is declining testosterone levels. So there's a chapter in my book on that. I'm actually updating the book this summer, so there'll be a revised edition out. But I think it's incredibly important for men as they age to keep an eye on their testosterone levels and make sure they don't expose themselves to anything that might inhibit, decrease, set off higher estrogen levels and testosterone, because it's what makes men men, right?
Yeah, well, when I say testosterone advice, I guess I mean it in a more of a metaphorical way, where a man without a testosterone, or at least sufficient levels of it, I see as a more of a flabby man. You know what I mean? Like men who don't live true to their core, who aren't aggressive, who don't pursue goals, who kind of make their woman to be the purpose of their existence, and basically live untrue to what it really means to be a man. So you wrote The Unplugged Alpha as a result of your YouTube channel taking off, and but before that, you owned a very successful debt settlement company, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So could you tell us more about that? Like, so obviously you were very successful, and all of a sudden you make a decision to walk away and start a whole new, start a whole new path in this educational direction.
Yeah, I started up the debt settlement business in 2003. It was a few months after I took a package from the collection agency I was working at. It's when I learned that they hire you for your resume and they fire you for your fit. So they gave me some money. I went home. I thought about what I was going to do, and I decided to lean into what I knew best at the time, which was essentially the credit collections, and like all of that space sort of integrates in everything from student loans to sundry items to NSF checks to credit cards, all kinds of stuff. So a lot of people struggle with credit card debt. I didn't see a lot of reasonable and viable ways to get out of it. So I set up a debt settlement company, which essentially negotiates between the creditor and the debtor. The company still runs today. It's the call center is located out in the east end of Toronto. It's called TotalDebtFreedom.ca. And it's, I think to this date, eliminated well over $250 million worth of Canadian unsecured credit card debt. There's also a book that I even published on the step-by-step process that people can find on Amazon if they search for my author name.
Wow, that's interesting. Let's talk about debt for a sec. I know it's not your primary area of focus these days, but it's something that I've noticed. I moved to Canada 5 years ago, and I moved from Israel. And in Israel, it's there's not much talk about credit card debt, but there is this common idea that it's okay to live in overdraft. Like when I moved to Israel, one thing that became evident is that our bills were greater than our income, and so we started sinking deeper, deeper, and deeper into overdraft until eventually we were like consistently beneath zero. And whenever a paycheck would come in, it would sort of like get us closer to zero, and then it would like slowly sink back, 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 and
Mm.
sometimes even deeper. Every now and again, the bank would say, look, we can't go on like that anymore. So my dad would take out a loan to cover the debt because the interest on the loan would be lower than the overdraft fees we were paying every month. But as I grew up, yeah, I know, but it's the reality. But and as I grew up, what's really interesting is I discovered that the vast majority of people in Israel kind of live like that. They live in consistent and
Mm.
constant overdraft. Now, when I moved to Canada, the idea of student loans, people taking on mortgages they can't afford, people are, putting all their bills on credit cards, they're buying today's groceries with tomorrow's money. And that became very obvious to me. So, and it sort of seems like debt is almost like this new form of slavery, isn't it?
It absolutely is, and it's not just debt. Like this is the way that the system enslaves you. You can use the exact same analogy that you talked about there with debt with people's health here as well in North America, because they offer you fast foods that are preservative laden with higher counts of ingredients that aren't good for you. So you end up sick. Sometimes you have heart disease, you have cholesterol issues, you might have diabetes. And then Big Pharma comes in and says, here, subscribe to this pill that you need to take basically for the rest of your life. It's essentially what the finance industry has done is it's enslaved people with debt, because if they get them on the merry-go-round of debt, if they get them in a cycle of paying debt, then they can offer them other facilities and products at a slightly lower interest rate that will ease the burden and the pain, but it's just another way to keep you enslaved in debt. And they're engineered. I mean, make no mistake about it. They're engineered contractually by their lawyers to move from one credit facility to the next to make sure that you can't get off the hook.
So you end up, most people, they kind of start off with a huge debt, right? I mean, I got a
Mhm.
buddy who's an environmental lawyer. We're not super close, but I do know that he started out his life with like over $100,000 in student loan debt.
Yeah, they usually start you young in school because somebody that's in their early 20s has a lot more life ahead of them than trying to get somebody that's 50 into debt. They're generally healthier. They generally live longer. They can, if they get them in school, then they're at some point going to chase the dream of mortgages, cars. And for the most part, you need, loans to buy houses and cars now today. So they get them in that cycle. And it's like a little bit of a drug. They give you something to give you a little bit of a hit. You get the brand new car. You feel good. You drive off the lot with the new plates. Everybody gets in. It smells so good, right? But when you look at the payment terms, it's not uncommon to see people get into situations where the things that they buy and they borrow for cost them a vast for like 5-10 times more than what the actual like cost of the original purchase would have been had they paid with cash. And that's just how the economy works today. When you see it and you understand it, then you can opt out from it. But the problem is you get kids walking around school that have never been financially educated or taught any form of literacy that, if we're being honest, probably our great grandparents would teach my parents' age sort of thing as they were coming to North America, but it's completely optional now. The conversation doesn't exist. There's no, buy things with money that you have instead of borrow or any of those things. Like when I was a kid, my grandfather used to talk about layaway, where he would go to a Marks and Spencer, for example, and if you liked a sweater, you would put a couple of pounds down for it, and you'd make payments every few paychecks, and then at some point when you've paid it off, you could take the sweater home and you could wear it. So things are very, very different today, and they prey on that because people like instant gratification. You want a car now? Don't worry about it. No money down. You need a house now? Don't worry about it. We'll also go on title of the house in case you default, so you don't even have to worry about that too now. So they create all of these new products and finance mechanisms that make it easier and easier for people to get what they want, but they don't really own anything. They think they own things, but most people that own a house today, they're sitting on a house the bank really owns on land that they have to pay taxes on that they don't own either, right?
Yeah, and that's very frustrating, all things considering, because it's like you can spend your whole life paying for things you don't actually own. And so you're no different. Even if you're paying off a mortgage, you're really no different than somebody who's renting.
Hmm.
because at the end of the day, it's the bank who owns it, and you
Hmm.
can't really do much with it. And don't even get me started on the whole, you know, uh, what the government's going to do with your money after you die, right?
Right.
Because they're going to tax it before you're able to transfer it to your kids or whatnot, and there's like a whole other set of issues with that. Um,
Hmm.
but I agree with you. Like my parents, well, so my parents were sort of in between this in this weird moment where they lived half their life in like a Soviet Union sort of state, and then they switched over to Israel after they were 40, and it's more of an Americanized society, in my opinion, because Israel
Hmm.
is very influenced by the US these days. And so the economic system works like in a kind of similar way. So my parents went from living life where you had to save up for a car, right? So like back when they were kids, a car would cost like 4,000 rubles and your paycheck was 120 something or whatever. And so you had to save up
Hmm.
for a long time as a family with all your siblings to get a car, and then you would share it too, and you would only take it out like once a week or whatnot, and you would really take good care of it, which I think is really cool, because if you have to save so much time, if you spend so much time saving for an item, you take way better care of it rather than being careless with it and discard it very quickly. I certainly know this to be true for me as a kid. Like if I were to get a toy, like I would cherish it. My kids today
Hmm.
don't really cherish their toys. It's like they'll play with
Yeah.
it now, and in an hour they forget about it. And then the other part of their life, they discovered Visa, Mastercard, debt facilities. And I remember the day my dad got Visa. I'm not sure if he even understood how it works, but he actually went on to buy a stereo system, a flat screen TV, and a vacuum cleaner. I think my mom insisted, the one that can wash as well as vacuum. And
Yeah.
so immediately put everything in like 27 payments, and we spent the next, like, I don't know, 3 or whatever years paying it off. And it was very unfortunate because uh, growing up with debt was tough. Like it was tough. Lots of borrowing, lots of like begging, mooching money
It's
off of relatives.
burdensome, and it's not designed to be paid off. It's designed to enslave you for as long as possible. Most debt, anyway.